If you look at the sky as airplanes cruise overhead, you've likely seen them. Tiny clouds that trail behind the aircraft as condensation trails or contrails. Some people think there is more than moisture up there. A video has recently emerged of the Premier speaking at a town hall in rural Saskatchewan. Scott Moe was asked about chemtrails and what he's doing about poison raining down on his province.
What are you going to do about the barium, aluminum, strontium, lithium, atrazine, raw kerosene, raw gasoline, and raw diesel that's being dumped on your province by God knows who?
I believe he's talking about the chemtrails.
It's a fact.
Do you have anybody doing soil tests and water tests for all of these chemical poisons being dumped on our heads?
There's a lot of soil tests going on. I don't know if they're looking for all of that or not. I'm starting to hear about this through emails into our office the last number of months, and I'll have to do some more work looking into it. I don't know if there's as coordinated an approach as some folks think, but there obviously are emissions that are coming out of the jets that are flying over, and the prospect is, or the projection is, there's going to be a lot more jets flying in the not too distant future than there is today.
That's the Premier, Scott Moe, responding to a question about chemtrails at a town hall in Spears, east of the Battlefords, about 6 weeks ago. Video of that town hall was recently posted online. The Premier says more people are asking about this, including perhaps this guy.
Hey, I'm going to be listening to your interview this morning about the chemtrails, okay? Because I just witnessed them on Sunday. Okay, clear blue sky, not a cloud in the sky. And those bastards showed up at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and started spraying whatever it is that they're spraying. And then all the trails, they were crisscrossing the sky. All the trails started joining together. And then the sky got hazy. And now here it is the next day, Monday. And it rained from 8 o'clock in the morning, solid. All day until, 2 o'clock in the morning, solid, okay? And this is the 5th time this year they've done it out here, okay? And every time they do it, seems like it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to rain, and then there they are. So I want to see if you're going to do a proper interview or if you're going to put a spin on it, because after all, it's only the right-wingers that are conspiracy theorists, right? You guys are so smart. Well, we'll see. We'll see. You got to eat too, right? You want to eat too. You want food too, right? And you want to breathe air. Are you going to ask what they're spraying? What are they spraying, Stephanie? Well, silver iodide. Is that any good for your health? Oh, silver iodide, that's if it's going to rain. But what about this shit that Bill Gates wants to spray out to reflect the sun back? Yeah, conspiracy theory, all right.
That's a call to our talkback line this morning before the show began. The caller thought I would edit that to make him sound like a lunatic, but I didn't edit it at all. For more on this, we've reached David Keith. He's a physicist and professor in the Department of the Geophysical Sciences at the University of Chicago, and he joins us now on the line. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Good to be here.
What do you make of what you've heard there?
Well, there's a lot of it. We've actually done some polling results that suggest that some significant fraction of Canadian and Americans, like 10 or 20%, believe that their government is somehow part of a conspiracy that is using commercial aircraft to spray some kind of toxins where the purported purpose might be mind control or mass murder or who knows what. So this conspiracy theory is out there for sure. And the question is why, and the question is why the Premier responded the way he did.
Why is this out there, do you think?
Really hard to tell. I'm an expert on atmospheric science and on some related idea called geoengineering, but I'm not an expert on why people believe conspiracy theories. It's clear that people believe a large number of them, from the idea that 9/11 was an inside job to the idea that there's aliens on some Air Force base in the US. I'm not the right person to speculate on why people believe them, but I think there are clear answers that politicians and other senior people ought to give.
What should the Premier have said to that question?
I think you need to find respectful ways that pick up on the fact that people really are asking questions that really concern them, but also are clear that we're not just going to look into something where there's no evidence whatsoever. So, we could look into whether the moon is actually has green cheese in the middle of it. We could look into whether Prime Minister Trudeau actually is an alien from some foreign planet. But the answer is it's just not credible to do that. There's no evidence whatsoever for this kind of thing to be true. You'd have to have a kind of conspiracy of lies at a level that there's just no precedent for. It makes no sense.
What does your expertise tell us about what science can do with the atmosphere?
Science can do all sorts of things with the atmosphere. I think you're talking about contrails here. There have been contrails have been observed and studied in detail since the beginning of the jet age. And it's absolutely true that there are some contrails that are persistent for more than a day. And there's been a huge amount of science on that with all sorts of open science publications from around the world for many, many decades. So it's a thing we understand pretty well. It's, of course, absolutely true that aircraft cause pollution, and they do even emit some unburned hydrocarbons and unburned aviation kerosene, jet fuel. So that's all correct. But it's essentially inconceivable that there's some secret program to put highly toxic extra material inside jet fuel. And the reason to believe that is not because I'm saying it and not because we have a test that proves it's not true, because you can't really prove a negative. The reason to say it is to think, how could it make any sense? And how could you ever keep such a thing a secret? Because to do that in a commercial aircraft, are fueled and managed at normal airports where there's an open environment. People have cell phones. If there was some conspiracy where people were loading poisons, it would be easy to expose.
How do you respond to people who question you on this?
I ask them why they believe it. I try and understand where they're coming from. So I don't just say you're wrong in a simple way. I ask them why and try and draw out and try and get them to explain the conspiracy and the reasons for it. And sometimes, at least, I have had experience of people changing their views. To be clear, I listened to the clip that Scott Moe said, and he didn't agree there was a conspiracy, but he said he'd heard things for months and they were looking into it. And I think it's possible to do better than that. It's possible to find polite ways to say that it's just really inconceivable that there is such a large-scale program.
What makes it inconceivable?
I think something about the structure of the kind of secrets that can be kept in our world. So if you think back even to the nuclear weapons program during World War II at Los Alamos, there were Soviet spies in that program. It's extraordinarily hard to keep secrets. In practice, governments can keep operational secrets, like secrets about, a specific raid or something for the period of that time. But there's really no precedent I can think of whatsoever of governments keeping secrets about some really large-scale program that has no positive justification, that's really destructive in an open society over decades, which is essentially what would have to be true if this chemtrails conspiracy theory was true. There's no obvious motive for it. And I guess I have faith, not in the government. Governments do, of course, deceive and lie at times. I have faith in regular Canadians. If this was actually happening, there'd have to be Canadian citizens there who were complicit in some kind of large-scale program that was destructive with no evident benefit. And there'd have to be a lot of them. If you're going to load materials into aircraft at giant scale, you need thousands of people in a supply chain. How on earth would they all keep a secret? It just makes no sense.
What kind of weather modification is going on? We heard from that caller, and also on Twitter, someone asks me, this is hard to defend when other countries openly admit to weather modification.
Oh, for sure. There's a history of weather modification that started in 1947 or so using silver iodide. So that's correctly responds to what the caller said. There is relatively widespread use of, or small but distributed use of these chemicals, silver iodide chemicals, but they don't look anything like commercial aircraft. They're not sprayed for commercial aircraft. They happen a different way. In general, the evidence is that weather modification doesn't do much, but it is used, and there are programs, yes. But those programs are all public and clear, and you can go look at them, and there's data, and they're regulated. So the fact that that is true, and it is true, it in no way makes it more real that there's some large-scale conspiracy involving commercial jet aircraft.
And how about this idea that climate scientists might like to reflect more of the sun back so that it would mitigate the effects of climate change?
So that's called solar geoengineering, and that's the topic that I work on. I've worked on it on and off for 30 years, and it's become a more and more serious topic because there actually is some possibility that it would reduce some of the risks of global warming, of climate change. And so more and more people and governments are looking into that. It's not a magic fix. It won't get us out of all our problems. But to be clear, it's not being done. And if it was done, it would be done with very different aircraft that would look different, that would have a completely different mechanism. And that would be done in a way that would be very hard to conceal, because it's hard to conceal things in a world like this.
David, over your career as a physicist and professor, have you seen things change in terms of people's willingness to believe in science or experts, or the opposite of that?
It's hard to say. I personally, because I work on solar geoengineering, and because people who believe in the chemtrails conspiracy theory kind of conflate the two, I've had experience with the chemtrails people, including actually having to call the police. One time when I was a professor at University of Calgary, we had a very violent caller who worked at a local car detailer who was saying that I was a mass murderer, and we eventually did have to call the Calgary police. And there have been other examples like that. There was a prominent Banff businessman who had a big sign purporting this conspiracy on the Trans-Canada between Calgary and Banff. So I've certainly had experience up close with it. My experience has been that whenever I've had face-to-face conversations with people who believe this, they've been reasonably respectful. The really hideous stuff, including like hideous anti-Semitic and violent things that come into my inbox. When people can be anonymous, they're more willing to be really angry and violent. I think the question is why people are so angry at science, at authority. I think there are reasons. I'm not an expert on those reasons. I think there are lots of ways in which scientists have been overconfident and prescriptive about public policy that maybe are part of the problem. But that doesn't excuse people having views that are really implausible like this.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.